Okay.
Etta Mae,
Mhm.
this is, I'm gonna ask you again about Travis, cause I didn't quite get all that in just a minute, okay? Travis is an old man, isn't he?
Oh, Travis
Battery
Sweat.
down.
Travis Sweat was supposed to get
What?
soon.
Okay. Here's the city hall.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's a
Oh.
good good building.
Well, I tell you,
Well, did you see the whole
I was
cemetery?
there the night of the opening. It was open on March 12th. But I'm not sure of the year. It was either 30. Let's see. I believe it was 36.
Leona.
But I'm not positive. It was either 36 or 37. Mm-hmm.
Now, I wonder if you could tell me about your early life when you first started working in the mills, and you were telling Judy about moving from one place to another. Could you talk about that?
Well, we started at Douglasville, Alabama. You mean when I went to work?
That's right.
No, you didn't work in Douglasville.
They said when I went to work. I started going to the mill when I was 9. But I went down there to help my sisters. I went to school. When I got home from school, Mama would say, well, pull off your school clothes and go help the girls. But I was supposed to have been 14 years old. 14 and a half. But I went to work when I was 14. But I was supposed to know all about spinning in the cotton mill. But they had started running better cotton, and they were supposed to twist up the ends. But I was just dabbing. The man I went to work for said, Etta Mae, you mean Lovala, my oldest sister, didn't learn you how to twist up ends? I said, no, ma'am. No, sir. He said, well, you just gonna have to go home, come back, and learn how to twist them up, because we can't have them dabbed up, because it makes a knot. So I went to work about a week later.
Tell me about your family moving from place to place.
Well, from the country, they moved to Douglasville. From Douglasville to Tallapoosa. We stayed there. I don't remember just how many years, but in 1913, we moved to East Union, Georgia. From East Union, Georgia, we moved to Barnesville, Georgia. And from Barnesville, Georgia, we moved to Griffin, to the first number 1. And from number 1, we moved to number 2. We hadn't been there but 3 weeks when my sister got burned. The man at the store had mixed gasoline and kerosene together. Kerosene pumps off of gas.
Put gasoline in a kerosene tank.
Well, why did you move so often?
Every time. Well, Papa, we worked for Mr. Joe Head at Tallapoosa, and every time he moved, he'd write to my father that we could make more at another mill. And they had 4 working in the mill at that time. 500. My brother Reuben went to work when he was 12 years old, but they wouldn't put that money in his. We got little tickets, and they wouldn't put that money in his ticket. He didn't have a ticket. They put it in my 2 sisters' tickets, split it. put it in two sisters' tickets.
Call them tickets, but they're envelopes.
Well,
Now,
still tickets.
could you tell me something about your father? Because he was obviously a very special man.
Well, he read a lot, and so did my mother. Besides the Bible, he kept up with politics and history. He had an old ancient history he read once a year. Then he read the Bible once a year. And he could tell you just about anywhere to find scripture in the Old Bible and the New Testament. If he finished a chapter tonight, he went back and read it again so that he'd remember it.
You were talking about, tell us about the newspapers he read.
Well, he read just about all the newspapers, but he saved Tom Watson's papers. We had a big stack of Tom Watson papers because he referred back to them every once in a while. But when Papa got busy reading, we could get around him doing most anything. But he was a strict parent. So was my mother. They didn't let us go off to play with other children, but they all come to our house. And at one time, there was 5 of us in school. But we could bring anybody home we wanted to. A lot of them stayed there at night. But we slept crossways of the bed when they did. Because we didn't have a bedroom.
Describe the house you lived in, how big it was, and how many people lived there.
4 rooms and a hall. We lived in one place at East Union about 3 years, and then we farmed 1 year. But we didn't get to go back to the same house. We had to move on. We lived on Hill Street, but we had to move on Field Street till that house got empty. Papa wanted the house because Papa didn't want to work in the mill because he didn't want a boss. But he farmed. He always, if he rented a place to farm. Sometimes we had to walk all the way across town. Eugene went to plowing when he was just big enough to hold a plastock. One time we walked all the way across across the village, way over to the waterworks, and about a quarter of a mile from there, me and Leona had to take his dinner. He told us one time that he had planted peas and corn instead of beans and corn. And if we'd go pick them up, he'd give us chew tobacco. We didn't know, a lot of times we'd get rabbit tobacco, but we didn't know what tobacco was. And I'm pretty sure if he took a chew tobacco, it'd make him sick. But for some reason, somebody had given him some tobacco. So we went, picked up them peas, all we could find.
2 rows.
2 long rows, too. And when we got to the creek, we lost all we'd eat that day because it made us so sick. We had to stay away from home a little while because it made us sick.
Now, your father did work in the mill, didn't he?
Mm-mm. All he ever done in the mill was to run the dope wagon.
Now, explain that dope.
Well, it was a Coca-Cola wagon, but they had lunches, light lunches on it, crackers, chewing gum, snuff, tobacco, things like that. And that's what he did in Hogan. He run the dope wagon. 'Cause but he farmed. We lived in this house at one time because he could have a pretty good sized garden back in there.
Now, let's move up to 1934. What do you remember about that time?
1934. I don't,
That's the year they had the strike.
well,
She's forgetting that.
Roosevelt was elected in 31, wasn't he?
32.
32. And he asked the mills to organize. So Hoganville was organized. But we went different mills.
Not all of it.
Lil said not tell all of it.
No, I said not all of Hoganville was organized. Some there we had some
Well,
that stood
No,
back.
not all of Hoganville, but there was enough of us. We first went to Rockmart. And they run us off with hose pipes. They got up on the mill, turned their hose on us.
I was lucky enough. I was never on one of those.
And then we went Sargent, Georgia. That's where, well, it used to be Governor
Arnold.
Arnold was the man that started Sargent's and Arnco. We went to Sargent, and they did come out. But if you're talking about who was on that truck, they were from LaGrange, and I'm not sure Grantville, Hoganville. And we met a lot of them from sergeants up there. Sergeants finally did organize, some, not all of them. All Hoganville wasn't organized either. But Eugene Talmadge was running for governor. Papa went to hear, and he never had voted for it. But he promised not to send out troops. But they got through with the election, I guess, at midnight. And that little boy that stood by me said he was called out at 6 o'clock in the morning. Leona would have been with us, but she wouldn't go because she hadn't had any breakfast.
I got up sick that morning too.
Well,
But me and Papa was the only one there.
From out
The
there.
two men that come from Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't know their names. They're the ones that organized what part of Hoganville was organized. But they wasn't supposed to take anybody except ones that worked at the mills. They was New Mill, Start Mill, and Old Mill. Well, they
Reed
closed Old Mill down.
well, now, you people had been working in the mills. You knew how much opposition there might be.
There was a lot of opposition.
What gave you the courage to do that?
I didn't call it courage.
Well, it was in a sense. For better.
Well, I can see
better
now you
working.
can't make people do anything. But we was trying to get them to organize.
For better pay and better hours.
But we hadn't been up there very long. Now the truck from LaGrange went back. I don't know who drove it back. But we didn't know where they was taking us. We didn't know what we were going to the big,
Penitentiary.
but we went to Fort McPherson. And when we got up there, They didn't have nothing but a big barn, and it was full of trucks. But they strung up barbed wire for the men, and they brought army cots for the women. And the only person that I remember coming out there was, his name was Captain Bell from the Army. And he told us that they was going to bring some army cots down there, and they was going to get a woman to stay with us. But we'd be guarded around the clock. And we were. They changed guards, I think about every 6 hours, maybe 4 hours. And some of the women here talk too much. You know what I'm talking about? They talked ugly. But after they got that woman down there, she quieted them down. But I didn't have any breakfast, dinner, supper, till about 8 o'clock that night. They stopped in Yemen and got all those guards. That little boy that was standing by me, and he was a boy, he wanted to give me part of his hamburger. They got hamburgers and hot dogs, slaw and coffee or drink. And I think we stayed up there 7 days, didn't we?
About a week.
Tell us about staying there. What was it like?
Well, they were good to us. They didn't discriminate against them, no way. Those boys that come out as guards was nice, and most of them was young boys. They was old enough to be in the Army.
What did you do for a bathroom?
We went to a little Johnny down in the woods, but a guard had to follow us. He didn't understand, he didn't go in with us, but that woman always. I wish I could think of her name, and I just thought, how come y'all didn't read that article? You said you saw it at the rainwater.
You want to read the article?
Sure.
You've got it. Yeah, we'll read it to you and see what you think.
I think we was there about 7 days, I'm not sure.
Okay. Should we start with 128 men and women detained in camp, or strike prisoners in cheerful mood? That's where Etta May is quoted.
Yeah, go ahead.
Start with Etta May's quote?
Yeah.
Imprisoned under martial, okay, this is Tuesday morning, September 18th, 1934. It says, strike prisoners in cheerful mood. Imprisoned under martial law, 16 women and 112 men, captured by National Guardsmen from a textile mill picket line at Noonan, settled down Monday night to the strange life of a makeshift military internment camp. The entire lot appeared in good spirits. They are the first persons taken in custody by the Georgia National Guard on charges of trying to keep workers from returning to mills reopening despite the national strike. The prisoners were taken in custody Monday by a flying squadron of guardsmen led by Adjutant General Lindley Camp under Governor Eugene Talmadge's martial law decree. The women, most of them girls in the late teens or early 20s, seemed more cheerful and much more conversational than the men prisoners. They all wondered when they would get out, but they did not appear worried. As long as they feed us, we are not howling, said one man. Etta May Zimmerman, one of the girl prisoners, said, we feel more honored to go out with the National Guard than with the scabs. She lives at Hogansville, some distance from Noonan. It was from that cotton mill center that most of the 128 prisoners came. We got up at 2 o'clock this morning to go over to Noonan for picket duty, said Mrs. Marg Granger, another prisoner. We were just peaceful picketing. Should I continue?
Yeah, but we was trying to get them to come out. Some of them went to work at 6. But now there's a lot of men and women from LaGrange, Georgia. There wasn't too many of us down there. Some of them was at New Mill, some of them was at the old mill. Callaway, when we come here, the two mills was New England Southern. Now, Callaway, I guess Callaway owned the new mill, old mill when we come here, as far as I know. No, he didn't.
No, the Stark, we came here on the Stark. And his Stark built the mill.
His
Callaway.
name's Stark.
Now, what I'm going to do now is to put on your television screen some actual newsreel footage of that time, and maybe you'll recognize some of the people.
I have to get up.
All right, you want to go?
See it.
Just get up and move closer to the television set.
I can't even see from here to
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
You're pretty close now, mate.
Yeah, but if I recognize
Okay, let's-
him, I have to get up close to it.
That's close enough.
And why don't you move your chair, just move the bench right up next to a piano bench.
You mean my picture will be on the...
No,
I
she
told
just wants you to see what's on
Yeah.
there.
Did you want to move up right next to her, please?
Well, do I need to?
Yeah, just right next to her so that. Yeah, I will. Okay, no, the first volume is when we've got what actually was in the
I guess where we take
yeah.
Fortnite.
Okay. Okay, now. Yeah.
Adopting the Textile Strikers flying squadron methods, National Guardsmen at Newnan, Georgia round up a group of pickets and place them under arrest. Women as well as men are taken in the militia's net. The strikers submit peacefully and are hustled off before bristling bayonets. State highway trucks are used to transport the prisoners, numbering about 200, many of them women and girls. This drastic action, authorities explain, is taken to prevent threatened violence. Specifically, those arrested are charged with attempting to prevent the reopening of the Newnan mills. Reminiscent of World War days is the hastily constructed internment camp in which the strikers are confined. This one is in back of Fort McPherson at Atlanta. Armed guards patrol the barbed wire enclosure surrounding the camp while the prisoners learn how it feels to be on the inside looking out. Chow time finds a lot of healthy appetites, and the incarcerated ladies make the best of their predicament. It's good old army grub, plain but nourishing, and the state is paying for it.
Sent out by Union Town.
Okay, now I'm going to cut down the volume because the rest of it is footage without sound. But I think you're going to be able to recognize a number of people, and when you do recognize people, just let us know. Okay?
Leona miles and I can't.
Okay.
Olivia Kramer.
Okay, go ahead.
There's three of those girls. Two of the Grange girls.
Two of the grandchildren.
Two of the Granges.
Oh, many characters.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be coming in just a moment. And if you recognize any of the men, maybe you'll spot your father.
Well, I can't see it too good.
They're
Leona
getting
might.
on the truck, May. I can see that.
Well, Papa didn't have to get on that truck either. One of them guards said, "Now, Grandpa, you
He had
know."
a daughter on that truck.
Well, I don't think it shows the barn truck where they kept the trucks.
There'll be a lot more footage coming up. Now this is Noonan still.
It wasn't raining that morning, was it? Somebody
It's
taking
cold.
care of the complexion. Umbrella.
Who is that? Leona? Who is that?
I really can't see whoever did have a mustache. No, I don't think we had too many men with mustache at that time. This one must have left over here on this side. Well, at least it
Well,
looks like
Ed
Mr.
was
Lester.
With us. Etta was with the men. His son was with the men. Is that where they're loading them on the truck?
That's right.
That's also it. T-Model Ford. I don't know. I'm not sure it's a Ford. I don't know if you know about this man standing right with him, but it's not.
Ribbon on here. We had a brother still in Cedartown.
And your brother was there as well, was he?
No,
He's in Cedartown.
What was he doing in
Just-
Cedartown?
Worked in the mill for Goodyear.
not the tow Tracy.
I had on a black and white check. On the one up there. But they sent me some clothes. Leon, can't you recognize some of them people?
No, not really.
Travis
hadn't
Whitman,
seen him.
Now,
had a
the
brother.
next one will be coming up. We'll see some people.
Travis Whitman was on that truck. His was a man.
I wouldn't have recognized him then. And
You
I
would
certainly
too,
wouldn't
because
have
it-
now.
Still up on.
This is still Newman.
And his brother.
Now, this is at the camp. Fort McPherson.
You see, there wasn't nothing there but the barn. And we got
It
there.
looks like somebody laying on a. No.
Oh.
He stooped over.
Two of those Horton girls, and one of them, well, Minnie had been
This is
married, but she wasn't living with her husband, Maud. I can't see nothing but trees.
Well, I can see them, but I haven't seen one yet I've recognized really.
You remember the tents?
Sure.
Tell us about the tents.
Well, they didn't have tents to begin with. They slept on the ground the first night. And then they put the men up some tents. But Charlie Frank Green hollered and hooped all the time we was up there.
Who was Charlie Frank Green?
He lived in Hoganson.
He was one of the strikers.
And if I'm
That
not
looks like-
mistaken, Ed Lester was Ed Lester
Wait a minute.
was it.
That's the Horton girl.
There's three of them. One of them died. So.
I don't know that. I don't know who this one over here on the end is.
Well, some of those women were from Sargent, Georgia.
Can't
Two of
see
them.
out.
I know.
It looks like Olivia and, or I guess it's Viola was the next oldest. Only the ones.
There's
over
3 of them.
there.
That one that died was
Yeah.
she married Drake.
Well, I said that looks like the Horton girl, but I didn't know who the last one was.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, their brother was along too, but his was a man. It's just the ones that went down early.